In this video, we're going to look at a dystopian novel called The Giver by Lois Lowry. This was published in 1993. It won the Newbery Medal in 1994, and this book is required reading in many high schools. So if you have to read this book, you've come to the right place, because we're going to explain everything here. Or if you just want to read a good book, then this is also the right place for you, because I think it's actually a really good book. So let's get into it. But first of all, before we can explain the book, we need to know what genre it is and what that means for us as readers. We know it's a dystopian novel, but what does that mean? Well, dystopia is a very specific type of fiction that has to do with a bad future. Okay, well, that doesn't help us much, does it? What do you mean by bad future? Well, in a dystopian novel, the setting is usually some version of the future that's not very pleasant. Usually there's some kind of oppressive government that controls every aspect of people's lives. There's usually a lot of technology, but the technology is used in ways that keep people oppressed. Also, dystopian stories often use futuristic settings to comment on current events. Okay, so dystopian novels are like warnings about what could happen in the future if things continue as they are now. And this brings us to the main character in this story, Jonas, who lives in a seemingly perfect society. In fact, Jonas's society seems too perfect. That's the problem. Things are so regulated and controlled that no one is allowed to experience any emotion or make their own choices. Everything from how they speak to each other to what job they have to what they eat, it's all decided by the committee of elders. Now, the elders believe that they are protecting people from pain and suffering by doing this. But as the story progresses, Jonas begins to understand that his community is actually sacrificing something far more valuable than freedom. Now, as you read this story, you should keep these questions in mind. How does the community try to protect its members? Is Jonas successful in his mission? And what is the significance of the color red? All of these questions have to do with the main conflict in the story, which has to do with freedom. The main conflict is between Jonas and the entire community he lives in. The community wants Jonas to be obedient and never question the rules. But Jonas has a natural curiosity, especially when it comes to the mysterious receiver of memory. You see, every adult in Jonas's community is given an assignment when they become adults, and the receiver of memory is the most important position of all. This person is responsible for remembering all of the emotions and experiences that the rest of the community has forgotten. You see, the elders believe that focusing on the past will cause pain and suffering, so they created this receiver of memory position to isolate someone, to remember all those memories. But there's a problem. The receiver of memory is getting older, and he needs to pass on his memories to someone else. And that's where Jonas comes in. He's the one who will take over this position and become the new receiver of memory. But after spending time with the old receiver of memory, Jonas begins to realize that his community has forgotten something very important. Let's talk about the theme of memory. One of the main themes of this novel is the importance of remembering the past. Jonas's community has tried to create a perfect world by forgetting about the past and eliminating pain and suffering. But as Jonas begins to remember more and more, he realizes that the past is not something to be feared. In fact, it's something to be cherished. Through memory, we learn from our mistakes and we're able to grow as individuals. Without memory, we're doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. Next up, we have the theme of choice. Another important theme in this novel is the importance of making your own choices. Jonas's community believes that making decisions for yourself is dangerous. That's why all of the decisions for them are made by the committee of elders. But as Jonas begins to remember more and more, he realizes that making your own choices is what makes you human. When you have the ability to choose, you also have the ability to grow and change. Now, if you're going to write an essay about this book, you'll probably need to include both of these themes, the importance of memory and the importance of choice. And of course, you don't want to forget the symbol of red. The color red is an important symbol in this novel. At first, red is a color that Jonas doesn't even know exists. Everything in his community is gray because the elders have banned all other colors. Red represents passion, love, and courage. All of these things are dangerous to the elders because they cause pain and suffering. But as Jonas begins to remember more and more, he realizes that these things are not bad. In fact, they're what make life worth living. Let's talk about characters. Jonas is obviously the main character in the story. He's a boy who lives in a seemingly perfect community. Jonas is curious and inquisitive. He likes to ask questions and he's not afraid to go against the rules. Jonas is brave and compassionate. He risks everything to save the baby and he never gives up hope. Now, another important character is the giver. The giver is the one who holds all of the memories of the community. He's old and wise, and he becomes a mentor to Jonas. The giver is also very sad. He's sad because he's the only one who remembers, and he knows that Jonas's community is forgetting what it means to be human. Now, we also have to mention Fiona. Fiona is one of Jonas's best friends. She's a brave and independent girl who's not afraid to speak her mind. Fiona is also very loyal. She stays by Jonas's side even though she doesn't understand what he's going through. Okay, now let's talk about the plot. The plot of this novel is pretty simple. Jonas is a young boy who lives in a seemingly perfect community, but as he begins to explore his world, he realizes that there is more to life than what he's been told. He meets the giver, who teaches him about the past and the importance of memory. Together, they come up with a plan to restore color and emotion to Jonas's community. If you want to understand the plot of this story, you need to pay attention to three things. First, you need to pay attention to the rules of Jonas's community. These rules are put in place to control people and keep them from being free. Second, you need to pay attention to the memories that the giver shares with Jonas. These memories show Jonas what life was like before the community was created. They also show him the importance of memory and choice. Finally, you need to pay attention to the relationship between Jonas and the giver. The giver is like a father figure to Jonas, and he helps Jonas to understand his powers and how to use them. Okay, finally, let's talk about the writing style. The writing style of this novel is simple. The language is easy to understand, and the sentences are short and to the point. However, despite the simple writing style, this is a very powerful story. The story is told from Jonas's point of view, and we see the world through his eyes. This gives us a unique perspective on this dystopian world. All right, now that you know everything about this book, it's time to make sure you don't forget anything. So here are the main points of the story. Jonas lives in a seemingly perfect community. He's assigned to be the new receiver of memory. He learns about the past from the giver. He decides to restore color and emotion to his community. Along the way, he falls in love with a girl named Fiona. They escape from the community together. Okay, that's it. We hope you enjoyed this video, and we hope that it helped you understand this book a little bit better. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Good luck on your essay, and see you next time.